Now, what in the world got me as a 50-year-old trial lawyer to want to learn all this stuff? As usual, there was a woman involved. So I'm sitting in a bar in Denver 34 years ago, and in walks the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my entire life. And in the 70s, I hung out in Aspen a lot and had a good time. And I get talking to her, and I'm completely, absolutely, totally blown away. So I live in Chicago and Denver, so when I'm back, we'll have dinner. So we have dinner. I said, let's go to the gym the next day. Because I figure I thought I was, God's gift to the world, like a lot of guys like me think. So we go to the gym, and I'm going to show her how strong I am. So she's 36, weighs 108, and Dr. Tyler, she squats 225, 8 reps. 108-year-old woman, 108-pound woman. And we walk out, and she says to me, "You're wasting your time." And I thought I'd impressed her. And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You're not getting anywhere. You're going to be dead soon. You don't work out hard enough." I said, "What should I do?" She said, "I'll find a strip mall where the guys that instruct you have necks bigger than your waist, and you'd be considered a pencil neck because you're such a skinny little guy." And I did that, and I started getting stronger and stronger. Then I got to be 60 years old, and then noticed all my ski buddies had quit. And I wondered why. So there's this thing called the internet. So I just started reading it. And in 1993, I remember well, I came across Dr. Fielding at Tufts had written about sarcopenia. And I read about it, and then I have a lot of doctor friends that do a lot of work, medical device cases and stuff, and I started asking people in your profession, what's this sarcopenia? Nobody had ever heard of it. So I started reading and reading and reading, and I began to see that, I wouldn't say nobody, but I know my two sons-in-laws have both told me that there is basically no exercise physiology taught in the medical schools where they're academic surgeons. None, zero. And then I began to wonder why a lot of my doctor friends had pot bellies. Because, fat inside messed around with your organs will kill you. Fat in your butt isn't bad at all. Some say it takes a big hammer to drive a big spike, but I wouldn't know about that. So what I'm going to do here, a lot has happened in the world's understanding of sarcopenia in the past few years. So I'm going to give you a little history because I think it's important. The word was invented in 1998 by Rosenberg. He decided back in 1988 that the most serious, striking feature of age-related decline was the loss of muscle mass and strength. I think really it's more strength than muscle mass now. He called this sarcopenia for loss of flesh. This term was rarely used. If you look at, all the stuff in my book is all peer-reviewed. This is not the ravings of a mad trial lawyer. But from 1988 till maybe 2007 or 8, you didn't see the word sarcopenia used very much. The age with the decline in strength that we see with aging was considered an inevitable a syndrome or a condition, not a disease. Didn't have a disease code, and people thought it's just what happens, Aunt Gertrude fell down at 75 and she broke her hip, and she spent a week in the hospital, and at that age, if you spend a week in the hospital, you're probably going to lose 20 or 30% of your strength in that week. And if you spend 2 weeks, it's gone. You'll never get it back unless you start pumping iron. And then a lot of people, maybe a fourth of the people that take a bad fall in their 70s never walk again, and a lot of them die. And I didn't know any of that stuff. I started finding that. So then things began to change. It was just 18 months ago that the AMA decided that sarcopenia was a disease. It's got a disease code. And so today I think you have to be careful when you're talking about sarcopenia because it's been described so many different ways and written about so many different ways. So whatever you say, you can find a peer-reviewed thing that will describe it differently, as we all know. But it's not bad to understand that sarcopenia is a disease which causes frailty as we age. Now, just last spring, the United States government took a look to see which were the worst diseases that affected the largest numbers of people in America for which there was no therapy, no cure. And they picked good old sarcopenia. And they had a sarcopenia conference in Washington, D.C. And I called them up and said, I want to be a witness. They said, you can't be a witness unless you're a victim. I said, I'm a victim. Everybody's a victim. I mean, I'm not alone. So I end up sitting up there with a bunch of my peers. And they have these government, I'd probably get some government people here, but they're very smart young guys. And they all have kind of nicely trimmed beards and all that. And the first guy stands up and he says, sarcopenia is the disease that nobody knows the cause and there is no cure. He says this. Room's full of people. I raised my hand. I said, can any of you guys read? What do I said, I'm not kidding. You got 1,000 people here from all over the country. And I see in the back a lot of the people I represent, Merck and Bayer and the Big Pharma. These are my friends, and we say hello. And they had pharma there because the theory of the United States government was, you know, one of the ways to test frailty is you get in a chair and you move across a room and you see how fast you can move from maybe from here to that screen. And they said, we think they can maybe invent a drug which will decrease the time it takes you to get from there to that screen by 5%. And then we can sell it and make everybody will want to buy it. And I said, you are crazy. Of course, you know America better than I do. Everybody wants a pill to take. And because my law practice, I spent a lot of time with the smartest, most successful business people in America. None of them get the idea of pumping iron. They think I'm crazy. They're uncomfortable with the idea of going to a gym, and you know, they like to run and bike, which is great for your slow twitch muscles. But if you want to get your fast twitch muscles, the 60% that are fast twitch, enable you to ski like you can. And you know, Resolution in Vail is my favorite ski run back in blue sky. Play basketball like I do, shoot my age, you know, and that kind of thing. David Crawford says, yeah, but you're playing from the women's tees. Well, that's the rules. And I play for a lot of money, so I play by. Anyway, so the point is, okay. Now, I have to motivate people, and I have to motivate you not only to stay thin and get your good cardio scores and run, but to use heavy weights to failure. Because strength comes from heavy weights to failure. It just does. And most smart people don't like the idea of going to a gym and, you know, doing curls or squats or one of my favorite exercises, lunges. Lunges are great, you know. That's where I got this butt, from lunges, I think. Okay. Why did the U.S. government say that frailty with aging, and I'm talking to you as individuals now, not physicians, frailty with aging is the most important of the problems of aging. Okay, I'm citing the guy that is one of the leading bioethicists in the U.S., all that deals, Harvard, Oxford, University of Pennsylvania. Added years of life. When my dad was born in 1898, his life expectancy was 40. Today, the life expectancy of people in the 1% is approaching 90. And if you're 60 years old, the mode, you know what the mode is? The mode is the most likely age you'll live to. If you're 60, the most likely mode is 90. So what's happening is we've extended the lifespan, but not the health span. So for most people, the ages from 60 to 90 are hell, and they really are. My dad lived to be 96. The last 15 years of his life, he could barely move. He never lost anything mentally, and he spent his time crying and saying, if only I'd done something else. This is a long time ago. He's been around long. So anyway, Ezekiel Emanuel writes a big article in Atlantic. Many of us, in the last 15 years of our lives, many of us are faltering, declining, feeble, ineffectual, pathetic for endless years. We are stooped, sluggish, forgetful, repetitive. We long to escape the cold gradations of decay of dying. And I know Zeke Emanuel because I'm from Chicago and I know his brother Ram. So I'm reading this, I'm up in Vail, and then he writes, it's better to die at 75 rather than endure the long years of decline. I called him and I said, Zeke, I just spent all day skiing with my 16-year-old granddaughter. I'm 84 years old. It's one of the best days of my entire life. He says, you're a freak. Well, I'm not a freak. I got cut from every team I ever went on. But I learned something from meeting this fabulous woman, and I've stuck with it because I am a disciplined guy, okay? But I want you to realize that very smart people think that a lot of people are wasting a big chunk of the last 30 years of their lives. I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point. My one roommate was an All-American lacrosse player. My other roommate was an All-American swimmer. They're both walking with walkers now. These two brilliant, I started there in 1950. They were athletic, 100-yard dash guys, sprinters, military officers, highly decorated, Vietnam and all that stuff. And now they're both my age, and they both are walking like this. And if I were you, I'd think about that. You want to be 85 or 90 and 95, and I'll tell you what it's like, and I'll tell you how to get there. But you can do every single goddamn thing at 85 or so than I could do when I was 22 and a U.S. Army Ranger. I can. And I'm not an athlete. I'm just a determined guy that wants to enjoy his life. Okay? So let's talk a second for what is the cause and what is the cure. Dr. Lieberman at Harvard's written a book. How many here have heard of the Mismatch Theory? That's amazing. I love evolution. I've always loved it. Dr. Lieberman has written this book, which I think is great, and he says that all these chronic diseases that will kill 70% of the people in this room are caused by the mismatch theory. Our genomes, and you can argue about evolution since 50,000 years ago, and how much is cultural. I know all those arguments, I read them. But the fact is that our genome today is about the same as it was 50,000 years ago. If a Cro-Magnon young girl came walking through a street in Paris dressed like a Parisian girl today, she'd look like she belonged there. The evolution that formed our genome happened 50,000 years ago. Natural selection is the most amazing thing in the world. When I was looking at your slides there, one can wonder, well, you said this is really interesting the way this works through the tumor. You know why that works that way? Natural selection. Somewhere a long time ago, and of course natural selection means that if you have a variable when you're born, and there's millions of them you have, if the variable allows you to live longer so you have more progeny, that variable will get into the gene pool. Now those variables, we tend to think it's your muscles and your appearance. It is every cell in your body. I read the New York Times today. This is really amazing. They've learned that exercise creates what they call vesicles, a word I never heard till this morning, in your cells, apparently little organic globes that have DNA in them. And these cells, these vesicles, seem to want to communicate and cause other things to happen in other parts of the body. And people say to me when they say, how could exercise do these things? The reason exercise can do it, there's a great Soviet geneticist, I don't want to get the name wrong. Dovansky. Nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. So every aspect of our body, every cell, our eyes, our eyelashes, our brains, our vesicles, when you work out with heavy weights to failure, Dr. Marnie Bopart, who is our co-author at the Beckman Institute in Illinois, has calculated more than 1,000 cellular changes take place in your cells when you pump higher and work out hard with weights. Why is that? We don't really know yet. But sometime down the line, somebody was born with a variation. And that variation gave them some kind of a slight advantage. And that slight advantage meant that they had more progeny. And then that little slight advantage got in the gene pool. What it boils down to is that our bodies are perfectly designed to compete in the world that they were designed for by natural selection 50,000 years ago. 24/7 intense physical activity. Dr. Lieberman, in his book about Harvard, says that the average person 50,000 years ago would look like a professional athlete today because they had to run, they had to defend themselves against saber-toothed tigers, they had to walk long distances when the food ran out, they had to dig and carry stuff and carry water, and they were busy all the time. So the basic cause, and if you read Lieberman's book, I think you'll agree with me, is sarcopenia is total inactivity. Our bodies were designed for a world of unbelievable activity. The average 60-year-old woman today does not get 1 hour of intense physical activity a year, not 1 hour. And you know, people ask me, how much do you need to get? I say, how good do you want to be? Okay, and there's a whole side story of what the exercise is, and in interval exercise, I believe in interval. I believe in getting my pulse up to 170, getting it back to 125, getting it up to 170, running like crazy, sprinting. I believe in all that stuff. But I don't have time to talk about that today. But remember that our bodies were designed in a world where we exercised in spurts. So our bodies are designed for intense physical activity in spurts. Now, if inactivity is the cause of frailty with aging, then the remedy obviously is exercise. And again, mismatch theory, Dr. Lieberman makes a very powerful point that our bodies are competing in a world they weren't designed for, and that all of these chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, 8 or 10 forms of cancer, et cetera, come from living in a totally sedentary world. After all, and Alzheimer's, there's peer-reviewed research in my book that you have a 60% less chance of getting Alzheimer's if you do hard resistance training, intense interval training. Now you say, how could that be? Explain the mechanism to me. I've argued with my sons-in-laws, you can't, they want to say, well, this happens, then this happens, then this lever falls over, and so on. So I said, if you grant that our bodies were designed to operate at their very best under intense physical activity, then if we want to keep our bodies operating at their best so we can be successful in this world, we want to keep them to the extent we possibly can in a world of intense physical activity. It makes sense that if your brain works best in the world it was designed for, your chances of getting Alzheimer's are less if you're engaging in intense physical activity. Now, I know a lot of this stuff you've never heard before. I just ask you to read Dr. Lieberman's book. I thought that way a long time ago when I began seeing at 60, I could do all the things I could ever do, and none of my buddies could. And the only thing different was I was in the gym every day. I know in my house in Vail and my house at Castle Pines, I have gyms better than any gym you'll find in Vail. And somebody said, why would you spend all the money? I said, it costs like a Chevrolet. Well, why would you dedicate this space to it? Because I said I love being me and not losing being me, okay? So anyway, both Harvard, there's still, there's not a lot of stuff like you're putting up on screens. But there's still people that say, when I was at the NIH, the guy there said, you better take it easy with that skiing. You're going to fall down, won't be able to get up. He said, you're crazy. You should be taking it easy. And when people say to me, I'm 70 and I'm weak, can I get strong again? I say, yes. I'm not a doctor. You need to talk to your doctor. Your doctor's going to say, take it easy. He's wrong. You're going to have to make a decision. That's what I say, because I can't run around as a lawyer and say, oh, go out and do this, and somebody dies, and they say he told me to do it. Okay, just to get you an idea, Harvard, about a month ago, said there are reams of research that exercise is a powerful preventive, even antidote to disability and illness with aging. Harvard. Over in the UK, I've worked with these guys. They have what they call the UK colleges. It's their college system in medical schools. Exercise is a miracle cure for a wide range of conditions, from cancer to dementia. And again, people say, how possibly could your data exist because of evolution? Our bodies, there was somebody had a way down the road, had a variation that worked, and now the variation is still working. And of course, it's very hard to get a small variation in a high gene pool, large gene pool. That's why when you go to the Galapagos, things happen a lot faster than they happen here. Okay. So, frailty with aging will ruin your life, or at least take away the enjoyment. I never dreamed when I was 35 and 40 and doing all this stuff. I never dreamed I'd ever thought about, be careful about falling down. Maybe 8 years ago, I noticed once in a while I catch a toe. You know what I do now? Whenever I wait for an elevator, I stand on one foot. I've got a Bosu ball in my gym, and I hop around on top of the Bosu ball. I skip, go to an NBA game or an NFL game. You'll see the athletes, they'll be skipping like this before the game. That's what they'll be doing. They do that because we don't lift our legs high in our normal day life. We keep them down here, and then we catch a toe, and we fall, break our hip, and we're in Gertrude. I skip. I sprint. I do all kinds of things. Skiing is great, by the way, because fast feet. You have to have fast feet to ski. If you have slow feet, then you start going back and forth like this. If you want to ski even resolution, these big soft bumps, which I ski, you gotta have fast feet. But it gives you fast feet. And but if you don't do these things, you will fall in your 70s or 80s. Maybe a third of people over 65 have a bad fall every year that changes their life forever. People are dying because of falls. But that's not even it. You want to be able to do the things we all love doing different things. You don't want to have to start worrying about the world moving in, and maybe I shouldn't do that, and maybe if running up steps in football stadiums is great. Very high knees. Just go to a high school stadium, run up and down, and think really hard about lifting your legs high. If you go like this, you will catch them. And I've done that and gotten bloody knees doing it, but I don't get them after a while, okay? So, what will life be like? Again, I'm going to be 86 in about 3 months. I have no sense at all of being confined or limited or making any decision that I want to make anywhere in the world because maybe I couldn't do it. I have no sense of that. Maybe I'm dumb. I'm not, and maybe I may take too many risks, but I have no sense of that. You go to Cambodia, and you climb up in those temples at Angkor Wat, and the steps are like this, and you see old folks, 60, being helped up there, and you run up, and it's great, and it's beautiful, and you think, just being able to do it. It's one of the greatest things in the world. I say, this is way more important than money. You lose money, you can get it back. But a day of a great life, if you lose it, you will never get that day of a great life back. You will never get it back. And people don't like me to say this, but I say, if you don't watch out, you'll be like the 23-year-old kid who wakes up in a hospital and he didn't fasten his seatbelt and he's paralyzed and he knows that he will never, ever walk again the rest of his life. If you don't do the things that I'm talking about in a macro sense, the time will come when you'll be 82 or 85 or some age, and why didn't I listen to that goofy guy that night? It will happen, okay? And my wife says it's better to be supportive rather than to try to scare people. You should be scared. When the first time I caught a toe, I was scared. I thought, holy shit, is this happening to me after all this work? Yes. Okay. The idea of moving. I play on my son works for Cisco. I play on his basketball team. I guard a 26-year-old guy. My son says, Dad, you're as good as you ever were, which wasn't very good. But the point is, I keep my body between the guy and I can have fun. Okay? You'll have a feeling of, the only way I can describe it is total exuberance of getting up every day and thinking, I'm the happiest at this stage in my life I've ever been in my life. Doing whatever I want to do as well as I want to do it, learning new things, not being cabined in by the restrictions or limitations of movement or old age. And, probably the most important thing I'll say today, and I'm winding up now, is the difference between what Ezekiel Emanuel describes as the winding down. I saw that my dad do that. My dad was a very smart guy. And he sat there like, when he's my age, I'd catch him crying. If I knew now, I would have done something different. I didn't know that. I'd say, buck up, Dad. Come on, don't be a sissy. Wrong thing to do. Okay, wrong thing to do. Okay, but anyway, the point is that you'll be, to age, and I went back to West Point to my class reunion, and we're all the same age, and the superintendent speaks. Then we walk out, and there's a big bunch of stairs and elevators. I was the only one who could go down the stairs. Only one. We were all these great soldiers. We were company commanders. We were rangers. And I go down the stairs. I'm not thinking about it. And my classmates, and then we get the class letter. And, we don't get out much anymore. I mean, I know you have friends like that once you're in your 70s and 80s. You do not want to be like that. You want to live the life you've always lived and never give a damn thought to it. I've gone on a little too long, but I care about this, and I'm not writing books like this for, to make a nickel or anything. I'm trying to get people to see that you can change and you can keep yourself the way you always were, or maybe even better. Well, thanks for your attention.